You do not start the trip by opening a door. You start it by waiting. Before you move an inch, other people are already moving for you. Men with earpieces. Drivers who never improvise. Security layers you barely notice unless you know where to look. The route is being checked, cleared, and controlled before your shoes ever touch the pavement. With Kim Jong Un's movements, public reporting has long pointed to tightly managed transport built around elite vehicles, heavy protection, and highly controlled logistics rather than ordinary leaders. You are the most powerful man in the country, and you cannot travel like a normal person. No spontaneous walk to a car. The trip begins as a security operation first, and a journey second. Even the vehicle is not just a vehicle. It is part symbol, part shelter, part warning. Reuters has reported Kim using luxury state cars, including Russian-made Urus limousines tied to Vladimir Putin, reinforcing how movement around him doubles as both protection and political theater. You step outside only after the world outside has been narrowed. The air feels ordinary. A short drive is not really a drive. It is a moving bubble, the drivers in front, security close behind, people on the edges doing jobs you are never meant to think about. It all looks calm if you see it from a distance. That is the point. Calm is part of the costume. Then you realize something stranger. The bubble starts before the convoy. It starts in the schedule, in the timing, in the fact that your arrival is treated like an event that must be sealed from uncertainty. The destination is not just a destination either. It has to be prepared, filtered, and tightened. By the time you appear, the place is no longer normal. It is a stage. You would think absolute authority means movement without friction. It means the opposite. The more important you are, the less random life you can tolerate. Every open space is a risk. Every unplanned second is exposure. So the system wraps itself around you tighter and tighter until travel stops feeling like movement and starts feeling like controlled passage. The doors shut with heavy certainty. The outside world turns into tinted glass and polished metal. From the sidewalk, it looks royal. From the inside, it feels different. Smaller, narrower. You thought the trip would begin when the engine started. It doesn't. It begins much earlier, when other people start erasing unpredictability from your path. And once you understand that, you understand the real rule of the travel bubble. You are never just going somewhere. You are being carried through a world that has been temporarily rearranged. And the moment the convoy rolls, you realize the road is the least important part of the journey. Now the bubble becomes visible. The convoy rolls, and suddenly the whole performance has shape, tinted glass. Doors that shut like vaults. The limousine is supposed to project ease, but it does the opposite. It tells you how much force is required to make one arrival look effortless. Reuters has reported Kim using high-end Russian Urus limousines, tied to Vladimir Putin, including publicly filmed drives in Pyongyang that turned the car itself into part of the political image. You thought the car was the symbol of freedom. It is actually the symbol of restriction, because once you are inside, everything outside becomes choreography. The entrance is not just an entrance. It is a checkpoint. It is ceremony. The cameras catch golem, not tension. From the outside, it looks smooth. Inside the bubble, every second is already spoken for. That is the contradiction that keeps getting sharper. The more relaxed the image, the more pressure is hiding underneath it. You wave, you smile, you step out for a few seconds, and it looks almost normal. But nothing here is casual. A normal person uses a car to get somewhere. You use a car to pass through a controlled pocket of reality built just for you. Then you notice the real cost. Spontaneity is gone. The convoy is not just protecting the man, it is protecting the myth. But the real bubble isn't built on roads, it's built on rails. Then you see the real throne, and it is not the limousine, it is the train. The convoy makes you look powerful. The train makes you look untouchable. It does not move like ordinary transport. It moves like a fortress that has decided it never needs to hurry. Reuters has reported for years that Kim Jong Un relies heavily on a green armored train for major trips. The trains are widely described as slow, heavy, and packed with layers of staff, communications, and support that turn travel into a sealed political environment rather than a simple ride. You thought speed mattered. It doesn't. Control matters. That is the second big reveal. In most countries, fast travel signals power. Here, slow travel does, because the point is not efficiency. The point is certainty. On a train like this, the route is fixed, the space is enclosed, and the inner world can be managed down to the smallest detail. Meetings can happen inside. Orders can move inside. Rest, security, ceremony, all of it can be folded into one rolling shell. What looks old-fashioned from the outside starts to make perfect sense from the inside. And that is where the contradiction gets deeper. The slower you move, the safer you feel. The train is not just transportation, it is dynasty on rails. Kim's father and grandfather were also associated with armored rail travel, which is why every modern trip by train feels bigger than logistics. It feels symbolic. The car shows status. The train shows continuity. It tells everyone watching that the regime does not simply travel, it arrives on its own terms. Inside the bubble, the world narrows again, not because the train is small, because it is complete. That is what makes it so different from the convoy. A motorcade moves through danger. The train carries its own protected world with it. Staff, security, communications, ritual. Reports on Kim's overseas rail journeys have described support teams, long waits at border stations, and logistics built around preserving control rather than saving time. The result is a strange kind of mobile isolation, a journey that feels huge in scale but tiny in personal freedom. You begin to understand why the train is mythologized. It is not glamorous in the usual way. It is heavier than that. More deliberate, more political, more intimidating. Every stop matters. Every crossing loaded with meaning. Every camera angle turns the train into a message. Stability, survival, continuity. But the deeper truth is darker. The train does not just protect your movement. It proves how impossible ordinary movement has become. You are not riding across distance. You are dragging an entire security universe with you because the outside world can never be treated as neutral. And when the rails can't carry you, the bubble has to leave the ground. You would think flying feels like freedom, height, speed, distance. But for Kim Jong Un, air travel has long looked more like exposure than escape. Reuters reported that he has used an Ilyushin 62MA for rare overseas flights, and that one of those trips was accompanied by a cargo plane believed to be carrying his limousine. Even in the air, the bubble does not shrink. It expands. That is the final contradiction. The fastest way to move feels the least natural because the plane solves one problem and creates another. It cuts time, it shortens distance, but it also strips away some of the heavy certainty that cars and trains provide. On the ground, the system can layer security, narrow access, and control the visual frame. In the air, the image still has to be managed: the runway, the boarding stairs, the tarmac, the destination, the vehicles waiting on the other end. The bubble does not disappear. It just has to stretch farther. You thought air travel would be the luxury version. It is actually the stress test, because now everything has to work across borders, across airports, across logistics chains that cannot be improvised. Reuters has reported that Kim's signature train is often preferred for security, comfort, and logistical convenience, carrying bodyguards, medical personnel, communications gear, vehicles, and even luxury office and living space. That detail changes the whole picture. It means the train is not just tradition. It is the closest thing this system has to a controlled world in motion. The plane is what happens when even that world has to be compressed into something narrower, faster, and less forgiving. And that brings you to the real answer. How he moves is not the story. How little he can move like anyone else, that is the story. The limousine looks regal, but it is a rolling shell. The convoy looks smooth, but it is organized tension. The train looks old, but it functions like a mobile fortress. The aircraft looks elite, but it reveals the limits of control more clearly than anything else. Every method promises power. Every method also proves confinement, or status. Less spontaneity, more protection, less ordinary life. That is the travel bubble in its purest form. It is not just about getting from one place to another. It is about carrying a sealed political universe around one man, because the outside world can never be trusted to stay ordinary. The bubble protects the leader. It protects the image. It protects the myth. Movement was never freedom. It was managed confinement. And in the end, the bubble goes everywhere with you, which means the cage does too. And somewhere beyond the tinted glass, beyond the armored doors, beyond the train carriage and the runway lights, the cycle continues.